It's the true crime story that rocked our nation. In 2019, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were accused in the doomsday murders of Lori's 2 children. Now, an Oregon-based criminal lawyer takes readers inside this horrific case in her new book, Children of Darkness and Light. We welcome author Lori Hellis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
This book is quite a task to tackle. We were just talking, it took you several years to get it all done.
Yeah, and there were a lot of delays thanks to COVID and thanks to trial delays.
Yeah. Tell me about how you first became aware of the case. It was kind of close to your neighborhood when you first heard about this.
So I had retired from practicing law in Bend and moved to Mesa, Arizona, thinking I was going to sit on my patio and write books. And it started out right in the neighboring town in Chandler.
So that's kind of where you heard about initially that the children were missing and that we didn't know the whereabouts of Lori at that time either.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the beginning of your book really dives into kind of the overarching culture and the belief system of this doomsday experience that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were anticipating. Right. And that really kind of sets the scene for the story. Can you tell us a little bit about what they thought was going to happen to the world?
So Lori and Chad were both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but more importantly, they were part of a small group sort of within the church who really believed that the end times were coming, that doomsday was upon us, and they're sort of embedded in the larger church, but they believed that the world was going to end in July of 2020. And and they also believed that Lori's children and other people who were involved in the case were possessed by evil spirits, and so they justified people's murder based on that.
There was a very specific number of 144,000 people that were going to survive this event, and it was going to be a time of tribulation after that.
Right. So for those that are familiar with the biblical book of Revelations, the Bible says that God will save 144,000, and they believed that they had been tasked by God to lead the 144,000 to be to survive the tribulation and rebuild the city of Zion.
So I think a lot of people became aware of the case and the kids specifically when Tylee and JJ's whereabouts were unknown. But a lot of people very close to Lori and Chad had also previously passed away, some of mysterious circumstances. Can you tell us a little bit of that timeline? It's just kind of fascinating how many things unfolded before that point.
Right. In 2018, Lori's third husband, who she'd been divorced from for a long time, was Tylee's father, died alone in his apartment. There's always been suspicion that she was somehow involved. And then Lori's fourth husband, Charles Vallow, was shot and killed in their home by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. He claimed that it was self-defense, but Lori is, and then he later died of, a lot of people suspect a suicide. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes, but that was before he could be prosecuted. Lori is currently in Arizona being prosecuted for the murder of Charles Vallow and also conspiracy to murder her niece's husband.
What was it like for you to examine this case with your background in criminal and family law and just seeing all the twists and turns and all the different people involved? It's a complicated family tree and then so many things on top of that.
It is, and you know, we were laughing ahead of time talking about how you really need a murder board with all of the
really
strings pointing to people. Yeah, it is a very complicated case. And then further complicated by the cult aspect of it, because they were involved in a much smaller group within the LDS Church that really could be called a cult.
And there are quite a few people who subscribe to this belief of, and they still do, even though that date in 2020 has passed.
Right. Yes, there is a smaller faction, but still a pretty substantial faction of people within the church who believe that the end times are coming. Each time we pass one of their dates, they say, oh, well, God spared us, or we weren't ready, or there's another rationalization
Sure.
for it. Yeah.
And it's not unique to them. I think we've heard that from different groups of different beliefs as well, too.
Right. It is not unique to them. There are many organizations and cults who have interpreted the Bible's book of Revelation in different ways.
Well, and kind of following the timeline and seeing all these sort of bizarre events that transpire, it seems like Lori had a certain set of social skills that allowed her to move through the world in a certain way while other things were happening behind the scenes. Does that kind of connect with what you found?
Very much so. Lori was certainly a person who traded on her good looks. She was an attractive woman. She always stayed very physically fit. She was at one point a contestant for Mrs. Texas. I mean, she was always, her outward appearance was very important to her. But she was a woman who really counted on the fact that allowances would be made for her because she was so attractive. But she was also very charismatic. People who knew her said, if you were Lori's friend, she love-bombed you. She was very generous. She gave lots of gifts, and she always had a house full of people who were there to socialize. And yeah, it was people who knew her were really drawn to her.
Yeah. So what gave you the drive to really sit down and dig into this case? Because I know it just must have taken endless hours of work to connect all the dots.
Well, it was kind of a crazy sequence of events. I was living in the Phoenix area and learned about the case and how strange it was. She was missing and her children were missing. And I discovered that there were Facebook groups that were following the case.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had questions just about things like legal things like extradition or bail.
Yeah.
And I would answer the questions, and then I would realize I have to tell them why I know, right?
Sure.
And that kind of was the launching off point. I thought, well, I'll start a little newsletter talking about the legal issues in the case that people have questions about. And it kind of blossomed from there. So when I called my agent and said, how do you feel about a true crime book? And here we are.
Because your previous book that you've published is quite different from this one.
It is. It's a book on divorce for millennials.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you can do it all.
I hope so.
Well, I appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thank you so much.
The book is just fascinating. And we want to let everybody know Lori's book again is Children of Darkness and Light. She will have a book signing event tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at Powell's Books on Cedar Hills Boulevard. We'll have more information on our website at katu.com. We'll be right back with more Afternoon Light right after this.